Before 𝕍𝒑𝒐𝒍𝒐𝒍𝒐𝒍𝒑, good day to everyone. Before I start the presentation of this research, let me just welcome with me online is 𝕠ℚ-𝕠𝕤𝕠𝕐, my co-community researcher. Both of us are from Pidlisan Ancestral Domain. Alma's name in the indigenous name is Amawan. My name in the indigenous or my ancestral name is Kalangbay, but my other indigenous name is Giboy. So let's start with exploring the narratives of Indigenous feminist leadership in the Cordillera, highlighting cases in Sagada, Tinglayan, and Sadanga. These are stories of resilience where Indigenous women came together to protect ancestral lands and uphold deeply rooted cultural values. Their actions reflect enduring lessons on leadership, community strength, and environmental stewardship. So why focus on these stories? Indigenous women's leadership has shaped their communities for generations, yet their narratives are often overlooked. Oral history, our primary means of transmitting these stories, can easily be lost if not documented. This research aims to preserve and elevate their contributions, showing us that Indigenous women have long held essential leadership roles in defending their lands and cultures. By documenting these accounts, we aim to keep their voices alive and ensure future generations can draw strength and inspiration from them. Ayun, sabi ko. So before that, before I discuss that, let me just dedicate this work to the people of Sagada, Tinglayan, and Sadanga, who generously shared their insight. It honors the wisdom of the ancestors who laid the groundwork, the present-day leaders who continue the work, and the future generations who will carry it forward. So we hope this study inspires more leaders to protect their communities and land with the same courage. So understanding the leadership of these women requires recognizing their intersecting identities. Indigenous women face unique challenges, being women in largely patriarchal world and Indigenous people within a colonized state. This dual identity adds layers of vulnerability, but also gives them a profound resilience and perspective. Their position allows them to live in ways that deeply value preservation, respect, and balance. Perspectives essential for true environmental conservation, which in turn affects the well-being of the ancestral domains or the ilis to where they belong. For the methodology, we use Psikolohiyang Pilipino or Filipino psychology to respectfully gather these stories through pagtatanong and pakikipagkwentuhan, or more in the language to accurately put it, it's more on mansudsudok, makiistorya, okay, to tell stories. This is guided by Linda Tuhuay's Smith principle that when Indigenous people lead the research, the process and focus shift meaningfully. We engage community members in ways that center their values and voices. This approach allowed the participants themselves to steer the narrative, making this a truly collaborative and community-driven study. Okay, the first case that I will be presenting, in Sagada, the women of 𝕑𝕑𝕠𝕟𝕣 face American expansion efforts by Lepanto mines, which threatened their ancestral lands. During this time, American prospectors with Philippine constabulary men went and set up camp in 𝕑𝕑𝕠𝕟𝕣, which is part of Agid, part of the Pidlisan ancestral domain. In response, these women dismantled the mining camp and in a powerful act of protest bared their bodies. This action held deep cultural significance. In their tradition, exposing oneself in protest calls a curse on those who violate sacred customs. Where were the men? They were just there. Men stood by in solidarity, prepared to intervene if necessary. But the Women's Act alone halted the mining expansion, demonstrating the strength of Indigenous values in resisting colonial encroachment. So what happened afterwards? The demonstrators were asked to report to Bontoc at that time. The case was dismissed and the mining project did not push through. The second case is that of the collective leadership in 𝕸𝕬𝕠𝕟𝕬 and Sadanga. A similar story unfolded in 𝕸𝕬𝕠𝕟𝕬 and Sadanga, where women took action against the Chico River Dam project. This was in the 1970s. This project threatened their lands, livelihoods, and culture. Here too, women protested by dismantling camps and exposing themselves as a warning, a powerful cultural act that represented both vulnerability and strength. Their actions emphasize that women are not simply supporters. They are leaders whose voices and bodies protect the land and tradition. Let me just give you a background for the Chico River Dam project. For context, the Chico River Dam project would have displaced communities in Sabangan, Sadanga, Tinglayan, and Tabuk, upending ecosystems and cultures. The Chico River Dam project envisioned under President Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was a planned World Bank funded initiative in the 1970s to construct 4 massive hydroelectric dams along the Chico River. This project aimed to produce a 1,000 megawatt power capacity but would have flooded around 1,400 square kilometers of the Cordillera, displacing more than 100,000 people, particularly in Kalinga and Mountain Province and nearby communities. Indigenous leaders and communities viewed the project as an existential threat to their land, culture, and autonomy, catalyzing protests and creating platform for indigenous resistance against state-imposed development projects that prioritize external interests over local lives and livelihood. While the story of 𝕝𝕝𝕠𝕟𝕬𝕠𝕟, a Kalingapangat leader, is well documented in accounts of the opposition, narratives of the vital role of the women in this resistance are often overlooked. Despite the overshadowing of their contributions in mainstream history, the women of Kalinga and other Cordilleran communities were crucial, contributing collective strength, cultural knowledge, and a symbolic, often spiritual form of protest. This include instances when the women disrobe invoking cultural beliefs that link female nudity to a curse upon onlookers, thereby using their bodies as a form of resistance that would spiritually and socially burden those attempting to take their lands. Indigenous leaders like 𝕝𝕝𝕠𝕟𝕬𝕠𝕟, who famously argued, "How can you own which outlives you? Only the people own the land because only the people live forever," framed the land as an inseparable part of people's identity. Women in these communities collectively embodied this sentiment, using their bodies not only to deter onlookers, but to signify a generational curse and warn against the violation of ancestral lands. This layered, culturally significant resistance helped ultimately halt the Chico River Dam project, and the World Bank withdrew its support following the outcry, marking a pivotal victory for the Cordilleran people and further cementing the narrative of indigenous resistance during Marcos martial law regime. Okay, for the analysis, these cases are examples of the power of we, as I heard Ma'am Bridget mention yesterday and today. It is tied closely to Trayande's collectivist theory, which sees leadership as an inherently communal. This aligns with the indigenous concept of the 𝕊𝕐, a community space where discussions happen collectively. In both cases, the women unite as a single voice, showing that shared goals and community solidarity are powerful tools in protecting culture and the land. When community members tell the stories of these protests today, they often speak collectively of the 𝕍𝕒𝕐 nin sukyat id kakaungi, or older women who bear themselves in kakaungi, underscoring the collective nature of leadership in this historical moment. This framing reflects the community's views that protest was a communal act rather than one of individual heroism. Thus, these women are remembered not by the individual names, but as the resilient women of the place, further illustrating how collective memory honors community unity over individual legacy. This collective identification reflects a community-centered view of leadership that values unity over individual recognition, reinforcing the idea that strength of this protest was rooted in their communal identity. And another analysis is on indigenous values and cultural beliefs. At the heart of this protest were indigenous values like Inayan, emphasizes community balance and well-being. By stripping in protest, the women tap into the cultural beliefs, exposing one's nakedness symbolizes bringing a curse upon those who dare to desecrate the community's values. This cultural act sent a powerful message. Violating women's dignity was not only honorable but also brought misfortune to the violators. These beliefs place women at the center of harmony in the ili, or the community, where gender roles are essential to maintaining peace. And so let me quote Elder Daluping of Tinglayan, who said that nugamin da kayo nga lalaki ti makisango ti kwa gulo. Isu nga da kayo nga babae ti mapan agkway. DIT na organized ti women nga nang hakot amin ti kwan ti NPC from Tumyangan to Tabuk. Women amin dagijay da nang hakot ti materials ti NPC ijay Tumyangan. Jay convergence ti Chico River and Pasil River. Isu dijay nagkwat da nga no da kayo ngay nga babae ta nugamin confrontation ti lalaki ket syempre gulo. No babae ket naglabos dakat kasla mabuteng da. So, yun. So, okay. So, to summarize yung quote, if men were to confront, it might result in violence. It is better for women to go. He explained that women were chosen to lead protests precisely because their presence brought a different energy, one rooted in non-violence and cultural respect. This gendered approach highlights how the roles of women in the community have long been recognized as powerful and strategic. So as a conclusion, these stories of Indigenous feminist leadership are remarkable examples of resilience and cultural integrity. By embracing collective strength, these women show that Indigenous values could stand against even the most powerful external pressures. Indigenous women are the protectors of both their communities and traditions, serving as a living link between the past and the future. And I placed there the picture of Patpatayan in Sagada. It's very much alive. It represents how very much alive then and how very much protected yung my well-being inside the community. So it requires yung cooperation of all, women, men, to protect the well-being of the community. So sa recommendations, to continue supporting Indigenous women's leadership, we recommend mainstreaming Indigenous women's leadership, including these narratives in educational materials to give their visibility to their contributions. The second is community-led conservation, empowering Indigenous approaches without labeling them as subversive or anti-state. And third is strengthening legal protections, recognizing Indigenous leadership strategies and respecting communities' autonomy. So where are the women of these communities now? Because that was in the 1930s and 1970s. Of course, most of them are dead, but their legacy lives on, or the tradition of protecting the community is still alive. I will share about an anecdote where we went there in the community during an Ubaya or rest day. And when we visited, we saw women ensuring these traditions were observed, reminding us that they remain the protectors of culture. As an elder woman from Pidilisan shared, taken nan na ikan nan ininaya amam aid kasin. Taken matlang nan na maikan nyo idwani. So the legacy of the elders, the women and the men before, are different from what you can do now. So signifying that strength and wisdom of the past generations live on in today's Indigenous women leaders, but with a twist. So Yaman, that ends my first presentation. You can see po dito, this is the sustainable peace in Sagada, a journey rooted in strength and community and tradition. But let me just open this study presentation with an anecdote from the community. During one bagnas or one community ritual, we witnessed an elder who called our attention and pointed us to that spear that you can see. That was the spear near the 𝕊𝕐. They just came from the Patpatayan, the elder, the men who just came from the 𝕊𝕐 was carrying that spear. And that made me realize na in well-being community rituals, they have this spear na it represents yung peace as without the absence of conflict. That they would usually fight or negotiate for their well-being. That includes yung conflicts within and without the community. So today, we'll examine yung journey of Indigenous process like within peace pacts and tungtungan dialogue alongside national peace efforts, exploring how both approaches coexist in this unique context. But before that, let's start with the broader view. According to the 2023 Global Peace Index, the Philippines face significant peace challenges. Persistent issues including insurgency, political conflicts, and regional tensions that affect overall stability. Sagada's model of peacemaking offers an alternative view that is not only relevant locally, but could also inform peace building across the nation. While rankings like the Global Peace Index highlight the national need for peace solutions, Sagada's story demonstrates that lasting peace is rooted in the sociocultural and psychological fabric of the communities. The Cordillera region is renowned for its indigenous peace processes. Rich in resources, the region has long drawn external interest from colonial powers to corporate investors. Despite this, the people of the Cordillera and Sagada have maintained control of their lands and have developed unique peace strategies to strengthen and sustain their way of life. Their journey reflects a commitment to self-determination and harmony, defending against pressures that could undermine their land and identity. So understanding these strategies offers valuable insight, especially as they evolve to navigate contemporary pressures. Sige. So for the research objective, the study aims to investigate Sagada's experience of peace building both within the community and as part of the national initiatives, focusing on Sagada's indigenous peace processes and experiences, their engagement with the government's whole of nation approach under 𝕠𝕐𝕐 or end local conflict against communism, and opportunities to bridge indigenous and national peace efforts for long-term peace. For the methodology, the research used a Psikologiyang Pilipino methodology, and also an additional is using thematic analysis of news articles using keywords like conflict encounter, peace zone, 𝕠𝕐𝕐, and Sagada to contextualize local and national viewpoints from 2010 to the present. So before I go to the results and the discussion, let me just present to you the Indigenous Peace Framework or the Indigenous Worldview of Sagada. So Sagada's peace framework is an interconnected model emphasizing harmony among three dimensions: environment, the ili; spirituality, the adikaila; and the people, umili, to bring about well-being. When this harmony is threatened, the community turns to pudan or peace pacts and tongtongan, dialogues. Oftentimes, they also use rituals. According to Amatigan, these rituals are dialogues with the unseen. Through these mechanisms, they not only resolve conflicts, but also reinforce shared values. So peace isn't merely about stopping violence. It's about restoring relationships and reaffirming the community's collective well-being. This unique framework illustrates the importance of respect and dialogue in sustaining harmony as seen in the physical and social model of the 𝕍𝕐𝕐. For the results and discussion, let's walk through Sagada's peace journey over the years. Pre-1970s, through pudan and tongtongan, Sagada managed intra- and intertribal conflicts, which included alliances formed during the boso days or headhunting days. This is seen by the padaws, the stones and the wood that you can see. These are markers of victims from the headhunting times. So these are located in the 𝕍𝕐𝕐. So besides this, the 𝕍𝕐𝕐 also is the socio-political structure that allows them to design the pudan, but the peace pacts. Okay, so the peace pacts today are communally, if in Kalinga and other parts of the Cordillera, there's a peace pact holder. The peace pact holder usually is a 𝕍𝕐𝕐, in this case in Sagada. In Tatapaan, one of the peace pacts was transferred, the peace pact holder was transferred to the church. That was the pre-1970s peace pact years. Now, in the 1970s, issues of self-determination came to the forefront with projects like the Celofil and Chico River Dam, which threatened indigenous lands of the IPs of the Cordilleras. This led some indigenous activists to become rebels, fighting for their rights and autonomy. After these projects were halted, many returned to their communities, but some remained in opposition, reflecting the complex and enduring nature of these conflicts. In the late 1980s, military encounters with the NPA led to the tragic deaths of two Sagada youths. This strategy moved the community to take action. In 1988, Sagada was declared a peace zone, the first of its kind in the Philippines. This was a significant milestone as it symbolized the community's commitment to peace despite external pressures. The peace zone allowed Sagada to flourish, leading to an era of development, particularly in tourism. 2010 onwards, so fast forward 30 years, 20 years pala. However, conflicts began to reemerge, with encounters between the military and NPA increasing from 2013. The pandemic years, the pandemic years saw a decline in these conflicts and a fragile peace supported by efforts from both the community and national programs. So from 2013 to 2018, media reports highlighted renewed tensions. The Agid Forest, the one that you see here, became a site of renewed conflict between the NPAs and government forces, revealing that peace zone was struggling. These clashes showed that the elements of violence, such as the repeated ambush of military and PNP personnel, could still trigger uh, violence. These incidents, often instigated by NPA encounters, tested the stability of the peace zone. The pandemic years saw reduced conflicts, partly due to 𝔸𝐵𝒈 and local peace effort. Yet, this fragile peace is a reminder that surface calm does not always address deeper issue. It produced unresolved internal conflict with the elites and reduced the trust among the umili. So let's just go back to the timeline. In 2018 and beyond, the whole of Nation of Approach or 𝕸𝐵𝒈 was introduced during the Duterte's administration, prioritizing economic reintegration for former rebels. In the same year, Sagada renewed a peace pact with Kalinga, symbolizing renewed commitments to harmony, though there were other similar programs from previous administration. Yung peace pact with Kalinga, they compared it like yung sisterhood agreements between cities, but it's beyond sisterhood because it develops yung relationship. Okay, it's deeper than sisterhood. Let's us just analyze yung whole of nation assumptions. While the whole of nation approach assumes that conflict stems from poverty and lack of development, promoting economic incentives as solutions. However, if we consider Sagada, it has a thriving tourism industry and small-scale mining, showing that economic development alone doesn't address the socio-cultural roots of conflict. Peace here requires more than external solution. It needs respect for local culture and psychological well-being. Yeah. And then, if we compare the indigenous peacemaking and the 𝕸𝐵𝒈, the indigenous practices are community-centered and focus on internal change. They emphasize the loob or 𝕃𝕋, an inner sense of intention, reconciliation, and restoration. The guiding values like Inayan, a principle of caution and respect, help to nurture trust and harmony, while the 𝕸𝐵𝒈 approach takes a top-down approach and focus heavily on economic reintegration. It provides external incentives without necessarily addressing deeper underlying social psychological needs. While it's pragmatic, it risks fostering internal conflict, eroding indigenous values, and even dehumanizing those who surrender by treating them as mere cases. So this contrast highlights the need for a balance that honors both economic and socio-cultural motivations. So a pressing question remains, can traditional peace process be integrated into broader national frameworks? Findings show that indigenous peace practices are more sustainable because they are rooted in the community's socio-psychological context. They address both external and internal motivations, aiming for long-term reconciliation and respect for dignity. So indigenous methods in Sagada emphasize healing the 𝕃𝒃 or loob, creating a trust-filled environment rather than one of residual conflict or distrust. Peace in this sense is not merely political, it's deeply personal and communal. It offers the lessons that could enhance the effectiveness of policies like 𝕸𝐵𝒈. On the other hand, while 𝕸𝐵𝒈 offers attractive economic incentives, it does not foster genuine, long-lasting peace without addressing social-psychological aspects. This approach risks perpetuating cycles of distrust and conflict. as it erodes communal values and encourage a more transactional capitalist mentality. So in conclusion, while the whole of a nation approach offers economic incentives, it lacks social psychological depth needed for lasting peace. Sustainable peace requires addressing the human aspects, the dignity, the trust, the internal motivation that make peace enduring. To achieve this, we need to integrate or interface, as Bridget said, indigenous peacemaking values into the national policies while preserving the narrative of Sagada's peace journey. Elders who have walked this journey stress the importance of sharing these stories with future generations to keep the lessons of peace alive. As Mr. Kilip, a local elder, pointed out, peace is a fragile concept. It must be nurtured by telling the story of how it was achieved. This underscores the need for a holistic, community-based approach to peace that goes beyond economic incentives to include social psychological healing and respect for cultural values. Moving forward, there is a need to integrate indigenous peacemaking elements into the modern frameworks to ensure that peace is not only achieved but sustained. Sagada's model show us that true peacemaking is about understanding, not force. As Albert Einstein wisely said, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. To close, here are the words of a respected Sagada elder. While we are still alive, we must write the story of peace so it's not forgotten. These are the things we can teach to the young ones. So this research is dedicated to all the peacemakers, the past, present, and the future. That ends my